Give a hand to our host, everybody.
All right. Awesome. It's just so good, the simplicity of the model, right? This is every time when I hear it explained, when we explain it ourselves, just the simplicity of moving people forward just one step and taking them from step 1 to step 2 and now to step 3, which is growth track. And I want to talk to you a little bit about that because there's so many things that we can learn about that. You know, of course, it's very clear in that passage in Exodus chapter 6, verse 6 and 7, that there's these 4 promises that God gives to us, these 4 I will promises. But, you know, even another passage, the Great Commission, that has already been referred to today, it's clear that Jesus basically had a plan like this in mind, which basically ties back to that to those 4 I will promises. Let me just read it to you. Matthew chapter 28, verse 18 through 20. Then Jesus came to them and said, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything that I've commanded you. And surely I am with you always to the very end of the age. And I think that's where the amen comes in, right? That Pastor Chris shared about, you know, amen, right? So, you know, we always wanted to do that as a church. We always, you know, when we started back in 2006, we wanted to disciple people. The problem was, it wasn't happening the way we hoped it would happen. You know, we actually grew fairly quickly from a handful of people in a living room, then to about 60 people in another place, in a chapel. And then when we opened, we had over 300 people here on the very first Sunday. And then what happens next is that there will be kind of like a Gideon revival. So next Sunday you have 150 people. Then the Sunday after that you have 120 people. And then we had years and years and years where the church just wouldn't really grow beyond those 150 people. It maybe grew to about 200 people after a couple of years. And we weren't seeing, you know, there were lives being changed. So that was good. But we weren't seeing as much as we had in our hearts for this area and for this church. And we developed a few things that kind of help people further. Probably the 2 best things that we had was like an introductory session to church life here. How do you become a part of this church? What is this church all about? We did that. And then, of course, we had Alpha Course, which has proven results throughout the years. That was something that was really working well. But we had no overall strategy as a church. We had no overarching picture of how we move people forward, how we kind of chart out those next steps for people. So what we're seeing is that in church life, we had things like consumer mentality. How many of you have ever had that in your church, consumer mentality? People love the show on a Sunday, and they maybe throw in a few coins in the offering, and that's about it. It's not good. That's not what church is supposed to be about, right? Church is supposed to change the world. That's what we're called to do. And no, there was no good follow-up with newcomers. Yeah, we tried to send emails to people, but there wasn't a consistent system that we had in those days. And we also didn't see that people really were starting to get on board with serving and giving. So we were thinking, we got to change this. You know, and basically we started to look at our process. What is our process to make it happen, to plug people into church, to see their lives changed on an ongoing basis? And you know, for many years, you know, we've heard things come by. It never really was the right thing to do. And we actually, after a while, we heard about Growth Track, and we thought, well, this could be the answer. So we added it to church life. I think it's like 2 years ago. But the problem was, it was just another event that we did. It was like another burden besides, you know, going to Sundays and prayer events and this event and that event. And then there was also Growth Track. So what happened is that nobody really showed up for it, to those Growth Track sessions. And we're missing the mark here. And I remember last year, I was in England. You know, the church had been growing since like 2009. The church started to grow fairly quickly. But I had this sense of like, how on earth am I going to manage this? I just don't have what it takes as a leader to lead the church forward. We had about, probably back then about last year, maybe about 500 people, 400 or 500 people. And I was at a session, church growth session in London. And I remember going outside and just calling out to God, Lord, I need some answers. I don't know if you've ever been at that place, but I was pretty desperate. How many of you how many of you have ever been desperate and then never got answers from God? Well, that was my situation there. So I called out to God, no answer. And months went by, nothing happening. And then I got this invitation to go to the Grow event, Grow conference, just like this day in Germany in October last year. I took a few people along to that session. John was there, Koen was there, for those of you who know who they are. A couple other, Peter was there. I saw Peter here as well. Jasper was there. Went there, and it was like, man, this makes sense. It's like, now I can finally tie together all these things that we're doing that were good and tie it together to an overarching vision. And now we could finally tie in the whole growth track, which we were already doing, and tie it into the bigger picture of things. So now it's no longer an extra event that you do here at Thousand Hills. No, it is the main thing, one of the main things that you do, one of the 4 main things that you do here at Thousand Hills. And that's really important. You know, you got to have a clear process in place in order for you to implement it. I've had many of you on the phone. You know, we've talked about Growth Track. We've sent out some, you know, our manuals for Growth Track, and you can have them for free. They're translated in Dutch. Also have it in English, but you know, you should probably go with the one with the real source. You know, Church of the Highlands. But the Dutch ones we have available, and it's very similar to the ones that Church of the Highlands has. But the thing is, we cannot just import a model or a method. It is really about the heart behind it and the big picture behind it. Because if you're just adding the growth track to what you're already doing, you're going to fail. That's not a prophecy, but it's just true. So we're really gotta embed it in that overall strategy. And you know, one of the things that also was like a thing that kind of stirred my heart was like 2-3 years ago. I was at the ARC conference in the States, and Lane Strands was doing a session there. And he said, you know, people will grow most when they're actually involved, when they're actually getting involved with the ministry of the church. I mean, it's great to have them come on a Sunday morning. It's great to have them part of a small group, but they need to be part of serving for them to really start growing, because they need to live, you know, what was explained this morning as well. They need to live for a purpose that is bigger than themselves. So that is really the end goal of Growth Track. You got to be really clear, what is the goal of Growth Track if you want to implement this in your church. If you don't have a clear end goal, don't start it. So the goal for us is just like how it is for Church of the Highlands. It is getting people to serve in healthy teams. Because once they join a healthy team, they are going to grow. Because they'll have leadership around them. They'll have people encouraging them. They can encourage others. And they're going to move forward with that. And so that's so important to have them part of those healthy teams. And you know, when you go back to Ephesians chapter 4, you know, where Paul speaks about the fivefold ministry, you know, apostles, prophets, pastors. So apostles, prophets, evangelists, pastors, and teachers. Got to take them in the right order, obviously. And what is the goal of these people? Is not to kind of do all the ministry themselves, right? The goal of the fivefold ministry is to equip God's people for works of service. And then when you read on in that chapter, it's all about spiritual growth. So apparently there's this cause and effect thing happening in Ephesians chapter 4 as well. You need to have, you know, people in leadership in the church that will help all of God's people to get involved in local church ministry. So the end goal of Growth Track is getting people to serve in healthy teams. You know, the fingers need to find the hand, and the hand needs to find the arm needs to find the body. You know, we're all part of the body of Christ. If one part is missing, you know, you'll lose most of your functions. So we all need to get involved in that, and we need to, you know, really get that point across to our people. So anyway, so some of the things that we learned that I just want to throw out to you here is, you know, Growth Track needs to be part of a bigger 4-cup strategy. We talked about it already, not just another event. Another thing that we learned is that it's real important to keep our cycles as short as possible. So it's great if you have like a membership class that are like 12 weeks in a row, but you're not gonna have a whole lot of people left by the end of the 12 weeks that will actually join your church. So you got to keep it short and concise. So our growth track is on a monthly rota. So the first Sunday, no, this is what it's going to be because we're just moved from doing it on a bi-weekly basis to a weekly basis. So the first Sunday will be the first session, the second Sunday that is the second session, etc. It used to be there used to be much more time, so things were going really slow, and we were like, man, after the growth session in Germany, I was like, we got to do this on a weekly basis. Of course, our team kind of, how are we going to make sure we do this? We don't have enough people to run it. And I'm sure you have that problem in your church as well. So I said, well, we got to do it. We just got to do it. Let's see how, God just needs to intervene in this situation. And otherwise, we're toast really, really here. But we did it. And miraculously, God provided the people that we needed to run Growth Track on in such a way that we could finish a whole cycle in a month's time. The beauty of that is that you could actually, when people start to come to your church, you could actually get them involved in ministry within 4 weeks' time. I was in California just 2 years ago at Aaron Jane's church. I'm sure you guys know Aaron Jane, and he started doing Growth Track, and he told me about this one person greeting some people at the door who had only been there for like 2-3 weeks. So he hadn't even finished all the Growth Track sessions, but because he'd done the fourth one, and I think the first one, he could already start serving. And it's just amazing to see that a church can be so quick and so, we really follow up with people. We don't let them wait for another year to see if they're spiritual enough to start serving or anything. No, we get them while they're still excited about the church. And so they can carry on that excitement to other people. There's another thing that's real important is simplicity. You need to keep things simple. If you provide a free course meal at every Growth Track session, you're gonna burn yourself out, right? And this is something that we had to learn, especially at the beginning, because we had big groups of people. So there's always a lot of management and logistics that goes into that. And so we actually had to simplify sometimes. Hey, let's do it a little simpler. Or let's order some pizza from the place right there, which is not open on a Sunday morning, so it doesn't really work. But there's a walk place there. There's some other place that sometimes we just bring food in. Sometimes we just prepare our own meals. Sometimes we have people bring in meals. But we keep it simple so we can keep it manageable and maintainable towards the future. So keep it simple, but include the meal. You know why? Because it shows hospitality. It shows generosity from you as a leadership and as a church. And that's what we want to bring across to people, right? We want them to feel like, hey, they're being treated as kings and we love them and we really care about you. Because when we start doing that as a leadership, they will start to kind of emulate that behavior when they deal with other people. That's kind of how things work. And then, the focus is another thing that is real important. Another thing that we learned as we started developing Growth Track here. Growth Track is the main... is basically the one assimilation process into church life here. There's nothing else besides that. It's just Growth Track. If you're new here, we're going to just say one thing to you, one next step, either through email or, in our case, it's emails that we send, but also, our leaders, we will always tell them, hey, go to Growth Track because you'll find out more about the church. And even in weekends, service, we try to limit the amount of announcements that we have and focus on Growth Track really in that, and even in the messages, we try to kind of bring it in and encourage people to join the next Growth Track session that is happening that same day, and it just needs the focus in order for it to be effective. Well, let me tell you a little bit more about the setup of Growth Track, how that kind of works in our context here. We have for each session we try to limit it to an hour. So that means 4 times an hour in total, spread out over a month. That's a doable thing, right? So that's one free lunch there. And then we got 4 sessions which tie in beautifully with the 4 cups again. First one is about church. We kind of want you to become acquainted with our church. What is this church all about? What do we believe? What are some of the characteristics of our church? How that all plays out? We try to explain it to them there. 101, which is the church session, is required if you want to become a member of Thousand Hills. You need to know what you're getting yourself into. Otherwise, it's better not to join the church. You got to know what we're about. So the 101 session is crucial there. The second session is about essentials, the essentials of Christian faith. And we talk through that, also to kind of feel out where people are at in their own journey of faith when they join a growth track session. And just for you to understand, in the beginning we had bigger groups like 10, 20, 30 people, but because we are now doing it on a weekly basis, we have smaller groups, which is really great because you can actually have more of that personal connection with people. And we try to kind of feel out where they're at in their journey of faith, and maybe they need to go and do an alpha course. We could kind of identify that when you have it in a 201 session on essentials. And there's a 301, which is a discovery session. And basically, this is one of the most popular sessions because everybody wants to know about themselves, right? More than they want to know about the church or about theology or whatever. They want to know about themselves. Who am I? How has God wired me to be? And that is what 301 is all about. So we do an inventory of their spiritual gifts. We look at also their talents. We look at their passion, what are they passionate about, because we want to help them to kind of serve in those areas that give them energy. Because it's, of course, there's things that just need to happen, especially when you're a young church, a smaller church. You need to get everybody on board with everything that really needs to happen. But once you start growing, it is just great that people are actually moved in those areas of ministries that really help them. So we do those inventories with them. We can actually do this pretty much within an hour time. It's real quick. It's not like an advanced disc test or an advanced spiritual gifts that you walk them through really quickly. But it helps really to figure out who these people are and what will be their area of ministry that will work best for them. And based on the results of that, we help them to find the right dream team that they should be part of, which team they should be on. Now, you may wonder the term dream team. Well, doesn't it sound arrogant? Well, it may sound arrogant to you, but I don't think it's arrogant at all. I mean, it's called after sports teams, the best sports teams. That is kind of like where the term comes from. But I truly believe that God has a dream for our country. He has a dream for this world. Do you believe that? Yeah. I believe He has a dream for your local church. He's wired your local church in a specific way to make a difference in a specific way wherever you're at. So there's a dream that God has for the local church. He has for the world. And He wants us to every person in your church, He wants to be part of kind of serving that dream, kind of finding their place in that dream that God has for the local church and for the world. And as we do that, as people do that, they discover what God's dream is for their own lives. Because they need to find out what God's dream is for their lives. There are too many people walking around this earth, many Christians even are walking around this earth, who have no clue what God called them for. That's frustrating. Because you kind of get into life and you kind of end up doing the same thing. It's the same thing every week anyway. And you're not making an impact. You're not, your friends and family, your colleagues, there's no life change that you see happening there. You got to find your purpose. You got to find God's dream for your life. And when we do that, people are experiencing the fulfillment that they so desperately want, but that they usually never find. But we can help them. And it's our job as pastors and leaders to help people find not only the redemption, where God restores you to the original purpose that He made you for, which is the growth track, where you discover that, but to really get plugged into that dream team so they find fulfillment. Because let me tell you this, if you have people that are like really bought into the small groups and are doing that, and maybe it's like 80% of your church going to small groups, and they're dealing with their issues the whole time, but they don't find that purpose that is bigger than them, you're gonna be frustrated. Your church is not going anywhere. So we gotta plug them into God's dream for the world, into God's dream for their own lives. So here's some of the big wins that we have from Growth Track. One thing is, we're doing the thing that Jesus called us to do. We're not only preaching the gospel at people and trying to get them saved. No, we're really helping them to become disciples, to grow in their relationship with God, and to really figure out that purpose that God has in our lives. We're living out the Great Commission as we speak. We're discipling people through them serving. So it's so important there. And you know what? It just works. for us. We're only at the beginning of the full potential of what Growth Track will realize in our church, but we've already seen great results since we really started to get on board like 100% with the Grow Vision and with the Growth Track, the way it's supposed to run. Since the beginning of the year, we've been doing this, and we just see that the number of times that we have to call for workers, we need volunteers here, we need volunteers there. Sorry? No, I can say it here because I'm on the platform. Yeah, they're thinking that they can get rich here. There's this thing here. I told this last Sunday. We're preaching on 4 cups, and so I told everybody who uses the term the V word here. Yeah, well, there, not here. They gotta understand this first, right? They gotta understand this first. They're gonna have to pay a €1 penalty. Is the same thing in Huizen as well or not? Yeah. Penalty as well, €1 penalty for everybody who uses the V word. Because the thing with volunteer is that it's like, how do you say that in English? Vrijblijvend. Any English speaker? What? Vrijblijvend. Now, but what's the translation for that? Option, yeah. Thanks, Eric. Thanks. So it sounds optional. When you're a volunteer, it's like, well, I don't feel so well, or I stayed up too late last night, so I'm just gonna sleep in, and I don't care about what's gonna happen with the welcome team tomorrow morning. That's kind of like the volunteer mentality. The dream team mentality is no, we're in this together. We're actually going to change the world through the welcome team or through the worship team or whatever team you're on. We're going to change the world. And so that mentality just has to change, and we see it changing as we work with this more and more. So the biblical culture of serving starts to take root in our church as a result of that, and people are actually joining those various dream teams in our church. So let's change the world together. I really want to encourage you to get on board with the whole Grow Vision, the whole 4 Cups deal, and to get on board with it, fully, not just to take bits and pieces that kind of suit your situation, but really buy into the overall vision. And if you call it 4 cups or something else, that's not really the main thing. The main thing is that you really understand, these are God's promises for us, those 4 promises, and we got to live them out in church life. And these are the main thing of everything that we will do at our church. So that we make sure people are no longer just warming seats and just showing up on church just to be consumers of a religious service. No, they got to be part of the dream team, and we got to help them. We got to help them take those next steps towards being part of that and making a difference for God in the world.